It's been 30 years since conservative cultural commentator Michael Medved wrote his then best-selling book, Hollywood versus America: Popular Culture and the War on Traditional Values. So I thought that it would be a good time for me to talk about this book that came out 30 years ago, a book that you probably haven't heard of, but which I eagerly read when it came out 30 years ago, because I think it tells us a lot about the way that conservative Christians think about the culture. Now, Medved himself is conservative Jew, but certainly he speaks the same language. And I think in this book evinces the same kind of moralizing and atomized approach to cultural engagement that is indicative of conservative evangelicals. And that's why I think his book has long had value and interest among evangelicals. And today, Michael Medved still has a popular radio show that I think, well, honestly, I don't listen to it, so I'm not going to comment on what that's like. But I do want to talk about this book, Hollywood versus America, and in particular, one particular little snippet of the book. At one point, Scorsese is talking about, he's like talking about how Hollywood is profane and vulgar. And he talks about the film Goodfellas, directed, of course, by Martin Scorsese, one of the greatest gangster films ever made. And he talks about the fact that Goodfellas has 246 F-bombs in the film. 246. And that apparently is a lot. And then he compares it. Michael Medved compares Goodfellas with 246 F-bombs to a film called White Heat, which came out in 1949 by Raoul Walsh. And this is what he says. Somehow, director Raoul Walsh managed to bring to life the cruel realities of his main character's world, both inside and outside of prison, while using 246 fewer F-words than Martin Scorsese employed in Goodfellas. Can any fair-minded observer watch White Heat and honestly declare that its effectiveness has been compromised? So here's the point I think that Michael Medved is making, is that you ought not to include F-words in movies if you don't need to. And it is possible to tell a gangster film without having any F-words in it. And so you ought not to have a gangster movie that has F-words, let alone 246 F-words spoken by the gangsters. Never mind, of course, that this actually is how gangsters talk, and verisimilitude, approximation to reality, is supposedly important in a film like Goodfellas. No, you should simply intrinsically view inclusion of swear words, irrespective of context or the aim of the film. You should intrinsically view it as bad, and the inclusion of swear words is bad. And thus, if you can make a film without swear words like White Heat, then you ought to do so, rather than make a film like Goodfellas, which is a debased, immoral film that is corrupting Hollywood. I mean, that seems to be the analysis that Michael Medved is giving us by counting swear words, counting F-bombs. Let's think about this. Let's consider an analogy. How many beheadings are there in the Bible? How many beheadings described in the Bible? Well, you have the famous beheading of Goliath, being beheaded by David after his death in 1 Samuel 17. In the Gospel, such as in Matthew 14, you have a reference to Herod beheading John the Baptist. That's 2. You have James, the brother of John, being described as being beheaded in Acts 12:2. You have David's soldiers beheading Ishbosheth in 2 Samuel 4, and they think that David will be happy about that, but he's not happy about it. And alas, he responds by killing the men who beheaded Ishbosheth and also amputating their hands and feet, just for added emphasis. And then you have the most grisly one. You have in 2 Kings 9 and 10, 70 false prophets are beheaded, and Jehu stacks up their 70 heads into a head pyramid. That's a lot of heads. And then you also have the beheading of King Saul and Sheba and the baker in the story of Joseph in Genesis. There may be a couple other outliers. I think that's most of them. Count those up, and you've at least got 77 beheadings in the Bible. Here's the question. Can God, an omnipotent, all-powerful God, can God make a revelation to humanity that has fewer than 77 beheadings? Seems that it's possible, right? We have other purported revelations. The Tao Te Ching has no beheadings, for example. The Bhagavad Gita, I haven't checked. I read the Bhagavad Gita in university, but that was 30 years ago. But I'm pretty sure, I don't think there are any beheadings. I know that there are not 77 beheadings in the Bhagavad Gita. So, I mean, it is possible to write a revelatory text ostensibly without beheadings, and certainly with fewer than 77 beheadings. So if you can do that, just like you can make White Heat without any F-bombs, why would you not make it without, why would you make Goodfellas if you can make White Heat, right? Why would you make a film with 246 F-bombs if you can make a film with no F-bombs? Why would you make a revelation for humanity with 77 plus beheadings of human beings if you could make a revelation with fewer than 77 beheadings of human beings? That's the thinking. That's the absurdity of this kind of atomized, moralistic approach to cultural engagement and evaluation, is that you don't worry about the fact, well, are you saying that stories about gangsters shouldn't be told and we shouldn't pursue verisimilitude when we tell those stories? And if this is the story of Henry Hill, which is the story of Goodfellas, and yeah, the truth is that he and his fellow gangsters, they swore all the time. Should you not include that? Should you not include the killings? Should you just give a sanctified, clean PG-13 story of the gangsters if you can do so? And if so, then surely God should as well. Of course, that's just the absurdity. But see, the irony here is precisely this, that these kinds of approaches to culture, they will apply that, this conservative religious approach, will apply that kind of moralizing, let's say, to Hollywood or to a non-religious book, and yet they set aside those standards when it comes to the Bible, which is full of things like beheadings and other grisly killings, like David killing and then amputating the hands and feet of the men who killed Ishbosheth. That's the kind of double standard we're dealing with here, the deep cognitive dissonance. Now, I don't have anything else to say about this except to point it out, how problematic this is. And then to say that if your approach to watching the film Goodfellas is to count the number of times you hear the F word, then I'm going to submit that you've really missed the point.